Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. Today we are going to be talking about WandaVision Episode 5. We definitely have a lot to talk about, and again, as always guys, this is going to be filled with spoilers, so if you guys haven't seen the episode, make sure to check that out and then come back here. And if you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. I'm doing reviews for every single episode of WandaVision, breakdowns as well, and Easter eggs, so if you guys haven't watched those, make sure you go back and check those out, and this way you get notifications for the rest of the episodes as well. Also, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the video out, and leave a comment down below just letting me know what you guys thought of the episode. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this because like I said, there is a lot to talk about with this episode. So the episode opens up and we see Wanda and Vision. They're trying to get the twins to go to sleep because they're crying, as babies do a lot. And eventually Vision, he goes away to go get their pacifiers, and Wanda tries to use her powers to put him to sleep, and it has no effect on him. And she even makes a comment. She's like, why won't you do what I want you to? Or, something along those lines. And I'm definitely curious, is it because they have powers and they're just not affected? Or is it because of some other reason? Then Agnes shows up, just when they say they need some help, and she's like, oh, I got a couple of tricks up my sleeve, which again, just another hint at, I think, her being Agatha Harkness. There's just so many clues as to her being the character who she's going to end up being revealed as, and there's more along the way with this episode as well. But she's like, oh, I got a couple of tricks up my sleeve, and she's like, oh, let me take care of this. And Vision's like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't. And then Agatha kind of looks at him and looks at Wanda and kind of breaks her character there for a second, and she's like, do you want me to take this from the top, or should we take this from the top? And, they both kind of look at her like, what? After that, she kind of plays along with Wanda, looking at her almost as if it's she has to listen to what Wanda has to do, or, at least to some degree. And then Vision afterwards is like, did you not think that was weird? And Wanda's like, oh no, she's just trying to help. And this is just more, we get to see more of Vision really starting to question what's going on in this world, and really questioning, Wanda as well. And we see Agnes, she's trying to help with the kids or whatever, and she puts this weird, she says it's lavender, she's putting it on, and which I thought that was interesting. I don't know if that is gonna play something into something in the future with the kids, and then she's talking about getting some dark liquor to help put them to sleep or whatever. But then when Wanda and Vision, they're talking about Agnes or whatever, they end up turning around because it's silent, and they go back to the crib. Babies are gone, and then they turn around and the kids have aged up to about 4 or 5 years old. And Agnes, she makes a comment, she says something along the lines oh, kids, you just can't control them, which kind of goes back to what was going on with Wanda not being able to control the kids. So there's definitely, something going on there. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. I want to hear what your guys' theories are on that. From there, we then get the episode, the classic 80s opening sitcom, which I thought was really funny and really cool. We had some Family Ties vibes, as well as Full House as well. Seeing the little kid pictures of Elizabeth Olsen, that was cool. It's obviously using her pictures, but they edit it to make it look she was from Sokovia. But the baby Vision was the one that really got me, especially when they started showing the baby pictures, because I was I looked to my fiance and I was like, he was never a baby, so it's just really weird. But I thought that whole opening was just a really nice tribute to the Full House, Family Ties, the 80s sitcoms and stuff like that. So that was a nice little touch. From there, we then cut to the outside world. So now, and I think this is pretty much what's going to happen the rest of the way. It's going to, at least for the most part, it's going to go between the sitcom world, and then it's going to, go into the outside world as well. So it's going to kind of balance that between the episodes. But we go back and we see Monica Rambeau. She's getting some work done on her, and we hear the director of Sword, asking what she remembers, and she just remembers pain and Wanda's voice in her head. And then the interesting thing is, so she's getting this work done, and she gets these scans. Well, the person that was doing it or whatever, she's like, oh, we have to do these again. They came back, it's not working. And we look and you see them, and the scans are blank, which I thought that was really, really interesting, but they kind of like move past it fairly quickly. But I think that's definitely going to be something that's important coming up. Like, does she already have like her powers to a degree? She just doesn't really know it yet. So I want to hear what you guys think of that as well. We then go to the director of S.W.O.R.D. He is giving a briefing of, of Wanda, and he's trying to like kind of like make her out to be more of like a terrorist and like a villain, where you have like Jimmy Woo, he's also, part of this like breakdown as well. And he's like, no, that's not exactly the case. That's like an oversimplification of, the whole thing. And the director, like at one point he like asked Jimmy, he's like, oh, does she like have any like code names, any weird things like that? And I thought that was funny, nice little like Easter egg to hinting at. I wonder if they're gonna eventually call her Scarlet Witch, because, that would be her funny like little nickname. So I wonder if someone is eventually like maybe Darcy or someone like that is going to actually come up with the name Scarlet Witch by the end of this series. But that was funny. And the director, like, he brings up like Lagos, which that plays into the episode a little bit later, but he just brings up, with in the beginning of Civil War, when Wanda accidentally caused the explosion that kind of led to like the events of, of Civil War as well, and where a lot of people, got injured and hurt and stuff like that. And then he's kind of going back and forth with Monica, and Monica's like, no, Wanda, she didn't try to hurt me. And he's like, oh, she threw you through the wall. And she's like, yeah, but she protected me. Which I remember when we were talking about that episode, I thought that, when she threw her through, I thought, maybe that Monica maybe just like had her powers and that's why she didn't get hurt. But it could be because you saw like the red around her. So it could have been that Wanda actually was protecting her and wasn't trying to kill Monica, because she actually doesn't really see her as a threat. It's funny though, because then the director of S.W.O.R.D., he brings up he's like, oh, well, actually, we got this video that I got to show you guys. And it shows Wanda, breaking into the S.W.O.R.D. agency, and she ends up picking up the pieces of Vision that are scattered all over the place. And so we find out that Wanda actually did go and get Vision and, bring him back to Westview. So that, that's like definitely interesting. So kind of not completely like resurrecting like a dead body. I'm thinking to some degree she must have like almost created like her own Vision, because she does have like, powers from like the Mind Stone. So she must have created like almost her own, Vision, brought him to life. But I also thought it was interesting that Vision in S.W.O.R.D., he was in like pieces and stuff like that. So it almost looked like they were doing maybe some kind of experiments. And that wouldn't surprise me, because this director is definitely giving off some shady vibes. So we'll see kind of what happens with that. But I think that there's definitely more than meets the eye as far as that goes. They were possibly using Vision to make some of these like different weapons and stuff like that, even though he said he didn't want that to happen. And it was cool to see this scene as well, because it sounds like something that was very similar. It's supposed to be a post-credit scene originally for Endgame that was kind of going to set up WandaVision. So I think the reason why they ended up cutting it out, because to a degree, they ended up using that scene right here. So that makes a lot of sense. At this point, we cut back to the sitcom, part of things, and we see Tommy and Billy, and they somehow end up finding this dog that's just like randomly like in their sink. They end up naming it Sparky. And then, Wanda's talking to Vision, and he's in like his human form, and she's like, oh, like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I just have a hunch that, a certain someone may be like popping over. And sure enough, right at that point when they find this dog and trying to figure out what they're going to do, Agnes shows up again, perfect timing, and she just happens to have something to help them out. She has the doghouse. So Vision's definitely, picking up on this, and it's just, interesting every time that they like need like help or something, that she shows up with the exact item or whatever that they need. So that's definitely something, and that's a theme throughout the rest of this episode as well. And Wanda and Vision, they end up telling the twins, they're like, you know what, you're too young to have, a dog like right now. It takes like a lot of responsibility. You can't have one until you're 10. And then the kids look at each other and they end up aging themselves up to about like, 10 years old. So that, I thought that was really interesting. Like, the kids have the ability to age themselves up. So we'll see how old they're actually going to get like in the series. And then, I'll mention it in like a little bit like later, but someone seems to be there every time that they age up as well. So we'll talk about that in a second. We then cut back to Monica. She's talking to Darcy, and she's, going on about how she wants to build some kind of vehicle so that way she can go back inside, the barrier that Wanda has. And Darcy's like, why would you want to do that? And she's like, and Monica brings up the fact that she knows like a aerospace engineer that'll be up to the task in order to help her with this. And we see her texting someone. Now, I've heard some people talking about, they're like, could that be like Reed Richards? I don't know if they're going to do that as far as the Fantastic Four, just because they had just barely announced that movie. I feel like it might be a little bit early for him to show up, but I'm wondering if this character that she's texting, maybe it's not even going to be someone of significance at all, but is it someone that we already know, or is it someone that, is going to be brand new? I'm thinking it's probably going to be like a brand new character. I just don't know if I quite buy into the theory of it's Reed Richards yet. But in a degree, it would kind of make sense. It would just be really surprising if they brought, one of them already into the show. Another thing that's interesting when these guys are talking is that hexagons get brought up again because Darcy is talking about, just like how the barrier that Wanda's, created is like in the shape of like a hexagon, and she refers to it as like the hex. And there's just been a lot of hexagons and stuff throughout the show, if you guys have noticed. Like I know at one point we went into the director of Sword's like office. All of his pictures were in the shape of like a hexagon. So there's just been a lot of things having to do with hexagons. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out as well. What do you guys think? What is the hexagon meaning? What do you think that whole thing is about? Let me know down below in the comments. We also have Monica, which this part was cool. She brings up the fact that Wanda, she almost took out Thanos by herself if it wasn't for him, calling for backup and having like the ships like fire at her and stuff, which, you guys all remember that in Endgame. That was one of the most like badass scenes. And it's like, yeah, she's obviously pretty powerful because she almost took out Thanos by herself. But then Jimmy Woo was like, oh, well, I don't know, like Captain Marvel, is pretty powerful as well. And when he brings up Captain Marvel, you see the look on Monica's face and she doesn't look too happy. Now, there obviously something like happened. Like, what do you guys think happened with there? I'm sure we're going to find out more about that in Captain Marvel 2. I'm assuming because Carol Danvers, she's been gone, and maybe she was gone when her mother, when she died, and she felt that, maybe Captain Marvel kind of abandoned them, which, I could understand why she would be upset. That's kind of what I'm going with, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think, might have happened as well. We then cut back at this point. We cut back to, again, the sitcom part of it, and we see Vision. He's at his work, and they have like their computers like set up where this is like the 80s now, and they end up getting a mysterious email, and he goes over to his friend like Norm, and they go to open it up, and the creepy part is like all of them except for like Vision, they all start reading the email at the same time, which is really super creepy. So they all like read it, and it has something to do with like the Maximoff anomaly and everything, and so Vision sees that. And then he ends up using his powers on Norm and snaps him out of his trance for a second. And you can tell Norm is like completely freaked out. He's like, where am I? Like, how long has it been? And then he looks at Vision, and, Vision's like, you got to calm down. You got to, like, I can't understand what you're trying to tell me. And he's like, you have to stop her. You have to stop her. The interesting thing I think about that, and it could be completely nothing, but he doesn't specifically say Wanda's name. He just says, you have to stop her. Could he mean Agatha Harkness? Possibility right there. It could be something, maybe he just doesn't know like Wanda's like actual like name, so that's why he's like saying her. But I thought it was interesting watching it like, the first time, why he didn't say Wanda's name. We then go back to Wanda, and she's with like the twins, and she's explaining, they're like, oh, like where's Dad? And she's like, oh, he's at work. And they're like, why is he at work? And she's like, oh, it's Monday. And the kids pick up on it, and they're like, no, today's Saturday. And she's like, well, like, he needed a distraction. And the kids are like, oh, is it because of us? And so she has to, like, explain that whole thing. I just thought it was interesting that the kids, again, just showing that they're not really affected by this, that they were able to pick up that, she was lying about, like, what day it was. So that's definitely going to be something that we'll see more, on that, like, in future, like, episodes. And then at this point, we get into what is, like, my favorite scene in the whole, like, episode by far. The twins, they end up asking Wanda, they're like, oh, like, do you have a brother? Because she was, talking about, like, oh, like, you'll always have your brother, and he'll always be your brother. And they're like, oh, did you have a brother? And she's like, yeah. The interesting thing, though, is that she says, he's far away, and she doesn't say he's dead. I thought that was interesting because, later on in the episode, we'll talk about the dog in a second, but it's, I could kind of understand, like, at first I was like, oh, maybe she was just trying to hide the fact that she doesn't want to say, like, her brother's, like, dead. But later on with the dog, like, when the dog ends up dying, she just straight up comes out and talks about, like, death pretty openly with them. So I thought it was interesting that she didn't say he was dead and that he was just, far, far away, and how it makes her sad. And that kind of ties into, kind of towards the end of the episode. But we'll get there in a second. At this point, Wanda goes outside because the dog's, like, freaking out, and the kids are like, oh, something's wrong. And Wanda, she goes outside and she sees the drone that Sword is flying in. Like, Monica's, like, controlling it at least to some degree, and they're, they can see the visuals of, like, Wanda and the kids, like, outside the house, and they're trying to communicate with her. But what Monica didn't realize is that there's, like, a little, like, missile attached to this thing, and when, Wanda, you see, like, she has, like, the red in her eyes, the director's like, go ahead and take your shot. And Monica's like, what? Like, no, we're not shooting at her. And then, the footage, like, cuts out. And then, we see there's a break, like, in the barrier, and we go, cut to outside, and Wanda ends up coming out, of the barrier, and she has, like, her jacket on and everything, takes the drone, and she's like, is this yours? And I was just like, oh, just, like, talking about this whole scene was definitely, like, my favorite. And you can hear, like, her accent comes back in this, because you can tell she's pissed. And I was just like, when I was watching it, for the first time, I was like, oh, shit, like, something's about to go down, like, right here. And, she's talking to, like, the director and stuff like that, and she's like, basically, she's like, this will be your only warning. It's like, you leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone. And it was just like, goddamn, like, yeah, don't mess with Wanda. But, like, Monica tries talking to her, and she's like, I'm an ally, I'm not trying to hurt you, I want to help you. And, Wanda, she's like, well, like, what would you, like, have to, like, offer to me, like, basically. And then, Wanda, all of a sudden you see, like, she's getting her powers, like, ready, and she turns all the guys that are outside with guns pointed at her. She turns all the guns and points them at the director. I didn't pick up on it first, but afterwards, like, watching it the second time, she only pointed it at him. She didn't point it at, Jimmy Woo, Darcy, or Monica. So I thought, so that's interesting. She's not, like, completely gone. She just hates this director, which, I mean, if you're about to, this guy was going to shoot her, so I completely understand that. But yeah, that was a pretty badass moment, and I think is just really kind of setting Wanda up, to possibly be the villain or whatever for Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. So I really can't wait to see how this storyline pans out. But that scene, I love that scene. I loved it so much. We also get, right after this, we get the commercial that we've gotten with pretty much, like, every episode with, like, the sitcoms. And this one is, paper towels where there's, like, like a mess and they're trying to clean it up. And it's brought to you by Lagos, which, again, beginning of the episode, they referred to that when the director brought it up. And, it says, like, something like, oh, cleaning up the messes you didn't mean to make. And, again, referring to, what happened with Wanda with the beginning of the Civil War movie, where she accidentally, killed, like, a bunch of people, injured a lot of people as well. So, and at the end, I believe it was, like, New Rockstars or something. I saw their video, and I was like, oh, I didn't pick up on that. But at the end, you can hear it's still kind of dripping, so it didn't completely, pick it up. And I was just like, ooh, that's kind of creepy. So after that, whole confrontation with Sword, Wanda goes back in with her kids, and they end up finding out that their dog died. They're walking back searching for the dog, and then Agnes shows up behind, like, the bush, and she has, like, the dog wrapped up in a blanket, says the dog died. And, I thought that was definitely, like, kind of weird, just kind of coincidental. I don't know, that the dog, like, just, like, died. I feel like there's definitely something more there with that whole thing. But then you see the two kids, and they look at each other, and Wanda's like, no, they're going to try and, like, age up again. And she's like, you can't, just, like, run away from things even though they make you sad. And I thought this whole speech, to her kids was kind of ironic. And the kids are like, yeah, but Mom, you can bring things back from the dead. And the interesting thing is, you see Agnes, she's like, you can? Like, almost as if she's kind of, like, surprised. And, Wanda's like, no, like, we can't do that. You can't bring people back from the dead, even though it seems like she kind of did that to a degree with Vision. So that whole conversation and stuff with her kids was very, very interesting. We then, the episode's basically kind of starting to wrap up from here. So Wanda, she ends up going back inside. Vision, like, comes in. and they start talking, and Vision like brings up, he's like, I saw Norm today and I was able to talk to him free from your control. And Wanda's like, I'm not like doing anything. And Vision, like, he starts getting like upset, and he's like, Norm, he has like a family and he doesn't like know what's like going on. And he's like, you have to stop like doing this to like people. And Wanda brings up the fact, she's like, how could I be controlling like everyone? Like, I can't make sure people get to like their appointments or doing all these different things, which, I mean, brings up kind of a good point. It's like, I mean, that would definitely take a lot of like planning and stuff to make sure these people are all doing these specific things. So, and there's more to that in a second, but I thought that was the first thing that she says that, that's interesting. And Wanda, she tries to end the show, and at first, like the first time watching it, I didn't like pick up on it again for some reason. My fiance actually pointed it out to me. But she tries to end the show, and you see the credits start like rolling, and Vision's like, no, like you can't like do this or whatever, and you can't control me. And Wanda's like, can't I? And she starts like, walking away as the credits are going, and then they get into a really big like, blowout, and they're just like fighting, going back and forth, and Vision's like, I can't remember anything before Westview, which is like, man, that, that's really, you feel really bad for him, because it's like, yeah, it's because you were dead before. And then Vision also brings up the fact that he's like, why is there no other kids in Westview? Which I know next week, I'm pretty sure next week is like the Halloween episode, and you do see kids there like running around the streets from some of the other promos. So I'm really interested to see like where all of a sudden these kids pop up from. So that's definitely going to be something to, keep an eye out for why that is. Wanda also brings up the fact too, she's like, I don't even know how this whole thing started, which is really interesting. So I think it just lends to the theory that there is, Wanda's not controlling everything. To a degree, she's controlling quite a bit, but I don't think she's controlling everything, and there's definitely someone behind the scenes, whether it's Agatha Harkness, or it's Mephisto, or, or someone else. And then, we finally get the end credit scene, or the ending scene that everyone, has been talking about. The doorbell rings, and Wanda's like, I didn't do that, which is interesting, because she seems sincere here. She could be lying, but she seems sincere. She goes to the door, ends up opening it up, and we see it's Evan Peters, Quicksilver from the X-Men movies. Now, I know I kind of knew he was gonna show up at some point, so I kind of knew that. So that kind of sucks for me. So hopefully some of you guys were a little bit more surprised. It was still really cool seeing him, just showing up. But I noticed from the first time watching the episode, from the very first time, the way that he's like talking to her and acting, like, I know it could be going along with like the kind of sitcom-y, the 80s like feel, and like playing like the cool like uncle or something like that. But he just seemed really weird. So to me, like, I just don't think that is necessarily, Quicksilver just from like another universe. Like, I honestly think it might be someone either controlling him or someone pretending to be, the Quicksilver from like another universe, and it's either Mephisto or someone like that. I've seen some people talking about a red hand, and I've gone back and I've looked. I haven't noticed it, and like I watched it and like press pause and stuff like that, and I don't really see it. So, and I've seen other people are saying kind of the same thing, where it's like some people do, some people don't. So I don't know about that, but I definitely think there's something weird going on as far as his character. So we'll see what happens, how long he stays around in the show. But yeah, I mean, that was pretty cool. And I don't think that's going to be the big reveal that a lot of people think that is still coming up. I know in the interview that they said there's a Luke-level cameo from, like, The Mandalorian. I know Elizabeth Olsen didn't say that. It was the person asking the question, and he was like, oh, is there a Luke-level cameo coming up? And she said yes. I just don't think it's Evan Peters. While it is, it's huge, obviously, because, like, it could potentially be, the first opening up of, like, the multiverse and stuff like that. That, obviously is a big deal. But I just think my gut tells me, it's too early. I feel like there's still maybe someone else showing up. And just with, with Quicksilver now being here, with earlier in the episode, I think it was kind of like an Easter egg when she turned all the guns on the Director of Sword. That was very Magneto-ish. So I honestly think that we're going to see some version of Magneto show up in the show. That is my theory. That's who I think is going to be the big reveal. So, but yeah, I'm curious to see, do you guys think that Evan Peters, was he the big reveal that they were kind of talking about? Do you think there's still someone else bigger coming along the way? I definitely want to know, let me know down below in the comments, as well as just all your thoughts and theories on everything else that we talked about. This was definitely a big episode, a lot of stuff going on, so I want to hear, your thoughts down below in the comments. Really appreciate it. And again, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to that way you get notifications for all the new videos. Like I said, I'm doing videos for every single episode, breaking them down, giving you some of my theories and thoughts. So definitely, give the video a thumbs up as well, as it really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Share the videos as well if you can. I really appreciate it. And as always, guys, please make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.